I spent 8 years in Chicago, a year in South Bend, and we moved to Detroit, and I spent my formative years up till World War II in Detroit, in Royal Oak, suburbs. You know, most of my friends, their fathers worked in the car business. As I got older and was going to art school, began to be aware of the fact that there was such a thing as designing cars. It was in its very early stages at that point. I got my first job cutting blueprints at Chrysler Engineering, working a night shift then, which allowed me to go to art school in the daytime. But then I got a chance to be an apprentice designer at Briggs Body, which did Ford and Chrysler bodies at the time. My dad got a job painting backgrounds for Disney. So I decided to try California too, so I moved with my mother and dad to California. Driving down Sunset Boulevard one day, and I saw this custom-built Packard sitting in front of this shop, and a sign on the building said Darren of Paris, so I stopped and went in and talked to Dutch Darren, and he hired me on the spot. So I spent a year doing cars for Errol Flynn and Al Jolson and Clark Gable. For a 19-year-old from Royal Oak, Michigan, that was a very heady year that I spent. There was a lot of fun. Didn't make much money, but had a ball. Point came when I had to make some serious money, support myself, so I went back to Detroit. The only unpleasant experience of my life ever working was for Hudson Motor Car Company. I had just gotten married, come back from a honeymoon, had $5 in the bank, and I got fired. But 2 days later, I had a job at Packard for more money than I'd been making at Hudson.
As U.S. involvement in World War II began, the federal government contracted with American automakers to build sea vessels and warplanes.
It was obvious we were going to wind up getting in the war, and we knew that there weren't going to be any new cars. Ed McCauley called us in and said, you know, we're going to have to close up the department, basically, but he said, so start looking for another job, but you'll stay on the payroll until you find something. I mean, it was a very good deal. So I got a job in the aircraft industry, switched to engineering and designing an aircraft, going in the Navy and got a commission and wound up doing engineering and training literature in the Aviation Training Command. The last year of the war, I wound up at One Park Avenue in New York. I mean, it was tough duty. It was tough because New York was pretty expensive and an ensign's pay didn't go very far. The lieutenant commander that ran our artist outfit, his wife started becoming an artist agent, getting work. So we were all moonlighting, making some money, but that's how I got started in the ad business. When after the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, the automobile companies immediately started full blast, and I had the Mercury account before I even got out of the Navy. Every year, they would hire a different background guy. So that was the new look of the ads. And finally, after a couple of years at Kane and Eckert, the art directors said to me one day when we were having lunch, he said, you know, he said, I run out of ideas of who to use for backgrounds next year. You know, I'll appreciate it if you look around.
My dad grew up in Southern California, went to Beverly Hills High School. At a very young age, he went to art college, maybe even at the same time he was finishing high school. Chenard Art School was a feeder school for Disney. One of his professors was hired by Disney and encouraged my father and one of his buddies to work at Disney.
Inequalities in pay structure and other labor issues resulted in an Animators Guild strike against Disney in 1941.
My father was not happy about the problems at Disney and wanted to strike out on his own. He liked the sophistication of New York. They moved to Southern Connecticut, which was right in the middle of a big artist colony. What my dad was doing during that time was freelancing.
Van and I had the same agent, and we both lived out in Connecticut, so we used to see each other occasionally.
Illustrated some books. He did the Italian line, steamship company.
So I'd seen what he had done on the Italian steamship line. It was a style that I thought was really neat, and it was different. I asked Van, I said, would you like to work on the Mercury account? Sure, we'd give it a try.
The professional pairing of Art Fitzpatrick and Van Kaufman would ultimately produce over 800 illustrations over the course of 24 years.
By 1952, I was doing 5 different accounts at the same time. I had Nash pretty much all through that period, then wound up adding Chrysler and Plymouth and Kaiser. I wound up doing some General Motors institutional stuff for Cudner Agency. And they had the Buick account. Next thing I started doing some Buicks. So they called me and wanted an ad like Tuesday, and I said, I can't do it, sorry. And I'm busy. I've got 3 others ahead of you in line.
When Cudner Advertising hired another artist and Buick wasn't satisfied with the results, they tried to sign Fitzpatrick to an exclusive contract.
I wasn't anxious to do it, but I said, well, let me think about it. So I figured that the only way I could gracefully not do this was to ask for such a deal that they would not figure they could do it. Bingo. No problem. I made them an offer I couldn't refuse, and figuring that they would, you know. When I signed the deal with Buick, well, in the first place, I mean, I wasn't going to be doing Mercury anymore. But Van and I, in those couple of years on the Mercury account, had become pretty good friends and used to working together. So when I got the Buick deal, I said to Van, I said, hey, you know, the Mercury thing is done. I'm through with that. Would you like to stay with me and work on the Buick? You know, well, fine. We never got anything from an art director. He looked at them and said, I don't have that kind of talent. You guys go ahead and do it. So from that day on, I mean, we did it all.
The Buick account required so many illustrations that Fitzpatrick didn't have time to do them all himself. So he hired 2 other artists, Dale Gustafson and Roger Metcalf, to paint some of the cars. Things went very well until 1958, when there was a change in management at Buick.
The successor general manager to the Buick division, he wrote a note back on top of one of my very first things I did for him that said, take the color out of the chrome. Chrome is black and white. So I resigned the account. I saw no point in trying to educate him or argue with him. My feeling is if they don't like what I do, they can get somebody else.
Fitzpatrick quickly secured a new and prestigious project, the 50th anniversary brochure for General Motors shareholders.
When I quit the Buick account and got the General Motors Golden Anniversary book to do, and I had to go around to all 5 divisions and their ad agencies. So when I went to the ad agency for Pontiac and Cadillac, McManus, the account executive on the Pontiac account was the guy who'd been ad manager at Buick. The sales manager at Pontiac had been assistant general sales manager at Buick, which is why I knew him. So I'm at the Pontiac ad agency on the General Motors book, and the young guy from Buick said, hey, we've got this new car and Knudsen wants a whole new thing and so forth and so on. Would you be interested in doing the Pontiac account? I said, sure. So I went back and told Van, I said, I think we got the Pontiac account. The other ads, people are washing their car, having a wonderful time, and the girl's sitting on the hood playing a banjo. I mean, that isn't anything for them to aspire to. They want to feel when they get in the car and leave that then they're as good as anybody else. All of the hundreds of Pontiac ads I did, there's only one picture I know of where anybody involved is looking at the car.
It was that ability to combine the car with that lifestyle and make it look like it fit together that was the reason they succeeded. When you look at those ads, you want to dive into those pictures. You want to go there. You want to be that person in those places, dressed up beautifully, you know, on a romantic evening out with your lady and your Pontiac.
Pontiac sales almost doubled within 2 years. By 1962, Pontiac was the 3rd best-selling car make in America, and that success attracted imitators.
When we were doing the Pontiac stuff, which was clobbering everybody sales-wise, and we went from 7th place to 3rd place in 18 months, Mercury and Oldsmobile were both trying to copy our stuff. I mean, we knew the artists who were doing these things. They're being told by the ad agency, the client says, follow the Pontiac, climb right up their backs, do it like Pontiac. Mercury starts running ads with fancy hotels with tiny type under the picture identifying the hotel. And my favorite was one, the Saranac Lake Lodge in New York. The building looked like Jackson State Prison. They never really understood the key to an emotional, sophisticated approach. And it was why we went to the European backgrounds. Most of them looked kind of elegant and the situations looked exotic, but what we were doing was showing stuff that was different than the Plaza Hotel in New York, the Fontainebleau in Miami, whatever, which is where Lincolns and Cadillacs all went to get their pictures taken.
If you got the Pontiac, you would be able to live the dream that was shown in those pictures. You could travel in the south of France, you'd have a beautiful girlfriend, and you'd go sailing, and you'd go to places where there were palm trees or go skiing. They managed to create an aura around Pontiac that just sold cars.